Most disasters don't begin with explosions or dramatic orchestral crescendos. They begin quietly. A single spark from a faulty wire. A missing screw. A tired man with a cracked screen. In Cade Merrick's case, the disaster began with a smudge of engine grease on his thumb. He had been elbow-deep in the ventilation turbine of level D-24, the lowest tier of Waypoint Tarsus. It was loud down there, the kind of loud that vibrated through the bones, and the constant mechanical hum made it easy to forget that planets even existed. Cade wiped sweat from his brow and reached for his comm tablet, meaning to send a message to his friend Jace. Something stupid. Something to keep them sane. Humor was the only thing that stood between them and the entropy that gnawed at the edges of frontier life. He typed the message lazily. If my boss ever knew how gorgeous she looked today, she'd have me reassigned to mining duty. He grinned at it, imagining Jace's snort laugh. Except the moment he tapped send, the screen flickered. And the name on top of the message thread wasn't Jace. It was Director Sarai Corinth. Cade froze. The wrench slipped from his fingers, clattered onto the metal flooring, and bounced halfway down the maintenance corridor. No, 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 no. He slammed his thumb against the unsafe, fractured glass, but the screen had already confirmed the worst possible reality. Message delivered. For a moment, Cade honestly considered crawling into the ventilation duct and living the rest of his life in the station's air system. His heart hammered, his stomach flipped, his brain stopped working entirely. Director Corinth, the most powerful person on Waypoint Tarsus. A woman whose name was spoken with the same mixture of awe and dread usually reserved for black holes. A Valanthi, a species known for their precision, their discipline, their unyielding sense of order. And also, for being profoundly intimidating. Jace is going to have a field day with this, Cade muttered to no one, burying his face in his hands. But then his comm device chimed. Once, twice, then a third time, in the unmistakable tone of a director-level override notification. He didn't even have to look. He knew exactly what it meant. She was coming. In his tiny living quarters on level C, Cade darted around like a man possessed. He shoved clutter under the couch. He grabbed discarded work suits off the floor and hurled them behind curtains. He bribed the malfunctioning coffee machine to produce something that wasn't sludge. He attempted, poorly, to flatten his hair. It was hopeless. A man shaped like a slightly stressed tree in floral shorts and a grease-stained shirt can only improve so much in 3 minutes. From behind the dining table, a small voice asked, "Daddy, are we expecting someone important?" Cade turned, forcing a smile that betrayed at least 12 different types of fear. Bria Merrick, his 6-year-old daughter, sat cross-legged on the floor with a toy hollow bear that flickered intermittently, a testament to how many times he'd fixed and refixed it. Cade said, "Depends on how you define important." As if on cue, the door console chimed. A soft, polite, terrifying sound. Bria's eyes widened. Is it the door lady again? The one who talks like she swallowed a dictionary? No, Cade whispered. It's worse. He approached the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. There she stood. Director Sarai Corinth was every rumor, every whispered story, every awe-tinged exaggeration come to life. She was tall, nearly a head above Cade, her features sharp and elegant, her skin shimmering in hues of deep ocean blues and starlit violets. Valenthy bioluminescence traced along her cheekbones and down her neck in silver streaks that pulsed subtly with her heartbeat. Her amber eyes were focused, piercing, impossible to escape. She looked like she'd been carved from celestial marble. And Cade looked like he'd tumbled out of a refuse chute. "Director," he croaked. "Mr. Merrick," she replied. Her voice wasn't harsh. It wasn't raised. It was calm, which somehow made everything infinitely worse. For a long moment, she simply studied him, and Cade felt every atom in his body rearrange itself to accommodate the weight of that gaze. Finally, she spoke. "You sent me a message." Cade swallowed. "Yes. Yes, technically. I received it." He was going to melt into a puddle and die. She tilted her head. "The message was unconventional." "I know," he said, mortified. "It was an accident. I swear. It was meant for Jace. Your coworker on D shift." "Yes. A male." "Yes. Then why did the message reference my appearance?" Cade blinked. His mouth opened and closed several times in a spectacular display of human malfunction. "Well, see, that's complicated." She stepped inside without being invited. Bria gasped. Cade panicked. Sarai Corinth, the most feared woman on the station, looked around his cramped family quarters with an unreadable expression. Then she turned to him. "Explain." Cade considered lying. He truly did. But her eyes, glowing, unyielding, silent, made it impossible. So he said the first honest thing that came to mind. "You're intimidatingly beautiful." Silence. Dead, airless silence. Cade felt his soul leave his body and ascend toward the nearest sun. Then, Sarai Corinth smiled. The universe itself seemed to stutter. "I am," she said simply, "aware." The smile wasn't mocking, or cruel, or amused at his expense. It was small, genuine, almost shy. Cade didn't trust it. "Director Corinth," he blurted, "I swear I'm not a weirdo. Or a creep. Or, I did not assume so." "You didn't." "No. That seems generous." She gave the faintest tilt of her head. "Your physiological signals indicate terror, not predatory interest." What? I can hear your heartbeat." Cade felt himself die for the second time in 10 minutes. Bria, who had been watching this exchange like a small, extremely judgmental owl, tugged on Sarai's coat. "Hi," she said. "Do you drink juice?" Sarai looked down at her. Then at Cade. Then back at the child. It was difficult to say who was more confused. "I do not commonly consume juice. Do you want to try some?" Bria asked, already dragging a chair over. Cade made a strangled noise. "Bria, Director Corinth probably has very important." "Yes." Cade stared at her. She cleared her throat. "Juice would be acceptable. .. A few minutes later, the most powerful woman on Waypoint Tarsus sat at a chipped dining table, holding a plastic cup with cartoon planets printed on the side. She sniffed it cautiously. It is fruity. That's why they call it fruit juice, Bria said patiently, as though explaining the concept of gravity. Sarai took a delicate sip. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture did. A subtle easing of her shoulders. A softening around the eyes. Cade watched in stunned silence. "What flavor is this?" she asked. "Grappleberry," Bria declared proudly. "Daddy says it's too sweet, but I like it." Sarai nodded gravely. "I find it agreeable." Cade was spiraling. He hadn't expected her to stay. He certainly hadn't expected her to sit down. But most shocking of all, she looked comfortable. Director Corinth, the woman who operated the station with surgical precision, was sitting in his tiny home drinking grappleberry juice like it was the most normal thing in the galaxy. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Director, why are you here?" She set the cup down and regarded him with those luminous eyes. "Because I wished to understand something." "What?" "You." Cade nearly fell off his chair. "You?" Cade echoed, certain he'd misheard. Sarai folded her hands neatly on the table. "Yes, you." Bria climbed into her lap with zero hesitation. Cade choked. Sarai went perfectly still. A Valenthy instinctive freeze response, but she didn't push the child away. Bria settled in like she'd found the warmest seat in the galaxy. Sarai's markings glowed faintly silver in surprise. Cade exhaled sharply. She doesn't really understand personal space. It is acceptable, Sarai said quietly. Bria patted one of the bioluminescent markings on Sarai's arm. "Ooh, you have shiny lines. Are you magic?" "I am Valenthy," Sarai replied. "That sounds magic. In certain contexts," she admitted, "it has been described as such." Cade watched, dumbstruck. Sarai Corinth did not let anyone touch her. He'd heard rumors, whispered among staff, that she once reprimanded a senior officer for brushing too close to her in a corridor. The Valenthy had strict cultural boundaries around proximity. But here she was, letting a 6-year-old crawl all over her. Letting Cade see this. His brain short-circuited. "Director," Cade said cautiously, "when you say you want to understand me, what exactly does that mean?" Sarai turned her gaze toward him. "When I received your message," she began, "I expected to feel irritation. Annoyance. Anything befitting an inappropriate comment sent by a subordinate." Cade winced. "But instead," she said softly, "I felt something else." He wasn't breathing. He wasn't sure he remembered how. "I felt curious." "Curious," he repeated. "About me." "Yes. Director. I promise you I'm not interesting enough to hold your curiosity for more than, 2 minutes." Her eyes flickered. "You underestimate your own impact." Cade felt heat crawl up the back of his neck. Bria began humming a song about space llamas. Sarai continued, "You addressed me as a person. Not a title. Not a rank. Not a symbol of authority. That is rare." Cade hesitated. I didn't mean to overstep. You did not, she said. You startled me. That is different. Startled. He'd startled the most composed woman on the station. How? He asked softly. Sarai's gaze drifted to Bria, who was now braiding a strand of Sarai's shimmering, midnight hair. Because no one has looked at me, she said quietly, in a very long time. The words hit Cade like gravity suddenly switching back on. Not with pity, but with recognition. He knew what it was to be unseen. To be needed for his work, valued for his labor, but invisible as a person. He knew that ache intimately. He just didn't expect her to know it too. It wasn't supposed to happen. That was the strangest part. None of this, the accidental message, the director stepping into his home, her drinking from a cheap plastic cup, was ever supposed to be possible. Yet here they were. Cade stood and moved toward the kitchenette, mostly because he needed something to do before his heart gave out. Would you? He began, trying to sound casual, like a cup of coffee. Your machine, she said, appears to be malfunctioning. It's always malfunctioning, but it produces something vaguely coffee-shaped. She considered this, then nodded. Cade turned his back to her and immediately started panicking internally again. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Asterisk. He poured water, pressed buttons that hissed angrily, stared at the machine like he could intimidate it into cooperating. Behind him, he heard Sarai ask, Mr. Merrick, you live alone with your daughter? Cade glanced back. Just me and Bria, yeah. Is there a maternal presence in her life? He paused mid-pour. No, he said quietly. My wife passed away 4 years ago. Sarai's markings dimmed. A Valenthy sign of grief. Soft, respectful, deep. My condolences, she said gently. Cade nodded, forcing a smile. We manage. Bria keeps me busy. She adores you, Sarai observed. And she likes new people, he said, watching Bria show Sarai her shaky crayon drawings. Not all new people, Sarai corrected. Only some. You're in the some, apparently. Sarai's expression softened. She didn't smile. Not exactly, but her luminous eyes warmed. Cade handed her the coffee. She accepted it with the care of someone receiving a fragile artifact. She took a sip, and coughed, violently. Bria laughed. Told you Daddy's coffee is bad. Sarai wiped her mouth delicately. It is potent. That's a very diplomatic way of saying awful. She frowned at the cup. It is not awful. You're being polite. I am being honest. Cade raised a brow. So you like it? Sarai stared at the cup again, as though calculating the philosophical implications of the question. After a moment, she said, I appreciate the intent behind it more than the taste. Cade felt something in his chest twist in a way both warm and painful. She wasn't talking about coffee. Not really. And he knew it. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. About the station. The strange quirks of frontier life. The minor rebellion happening on Level B over rationed dessert bars. The way Bria believed that comets were actually frozen baby stars. Cade expected Sarai to be formal, rigid, cold, but she wasn't. She was thoughtful, cautious, yes, like someone unaccustomed to being allowed softness, but genuinely curious. When Cade told her about the ventilation turbines and the ancient wiring he'd been repairing for 2 years, she listened like he was describing art. When he explained how Bria liked to watch ships take off from the viewing deck, Sarai asked what kinds she could recognize. When Bria fell asleep halfway through showing Sarai every picture she'd ever drawn, Sarai lifted the child gently and carried her to the small bedroom. She covered her with a blanket, smoothed her hair, stood there quietly for a long moment. Cade watched from the doorway, something tightening in his throat. "You're good with her," he whispered. Sarai didn't turn. "I have not interacted closely with children since my Talaran years. I don't know what that is." "A Valanthi rite. One that teaches responsibility for the next generation. And you liked it." For the first time that evening, Sarai hesitated. "Yes," she admitted. Cade's heart ached for reasons he couldn't name. When Bria was asleep and the apartment had grown quiet, Sarai stood by the door, preparing to leave. Cade tried not to look disappointed. Failed, she noticed. "Mr. Merrick," she said, her voice softer than before, "today was unexpected." "That makes 2 of us," he replied. She inclined her head. "I did not anticipate enjoying your company." "Likewise," he said with a small smile. Sarai's gaze flickered. "Will this complicate matters?" she asked quietly. Cade swallowed. "Well, you're my boss's boss's boss. So, technically, yes. And still," she murmured, "I do not regret coming here." He stepped closer. "You could come back," he said before he could overthink it. Sarai's breath caught. Just barely, but he saw it. Her luminous markings pulsed silver once. "Perhaps," she whispered, "I will." Then she left, and Cade closed the door, and leaned his forehead against it, and wondered how one message, one stupid, accidental message, could change the trajectory of an entire life. For the next 2 days, Cade walked around Waypoint Tarsus with the uneasy sensation that the universe had changed shape but hadn't bothered to inform him how. He kept expecting an official summons, a reprimand, a disciplinary notice, security escorting him off the premises for unprofessional conduct. But nothing came. The only sign that anything had happened at all was that whenever he walked near the lifts, he found himself glancing, casually, he hoped, toward the executive level. It was ridiculous. Director Corinth had spent one evening in his home. One accidental, extraordinary, impossible evening. She wasn't going to repeat the experience. But that didn't stop him from checking the time every hour, or catching himself staring into space like a teenager who'd just discovered romance for the first time. Jace noticed immediately. "You've got that look," Jace said on their lunch break, tearing open a rehydrated ration packet with his teeth. "What look?" "The look of a man who either had a religious experience or fell in love with an airlock." "Which was it?" "Neither," Cade muttered. Jace snorted. "Oh, come on. Something happened. You've been weird since." He stopped. His eyes widened slowly, dramatically, until Cade felt dread climb up his backbone. "Oh," Jace whispered. "Ooh. Oh no, you didn't." "Didn't what?" "You didn't actually talk to her." Cade said nothing. Jace dropped his utensils. "You talked to her. It was an accident. You talked to the director. She came to my apartment." "Your apartment?" "Jace." Jace's voice cracked high enough to scare a technician 2 tables over. "Cade. Cade. Buddy. Pal. Listen to me. Normal people don't survive in scheduled encounters with the director. Normal people don't get out of one of those with all their limbs attached. And you're telling me she came to your place voluntarily?" Cade sighed. "It wasn't like that. It's always like something," Jace hissed, leaning in. "Did you bow? Did you kneel? Did you offer a sacrifice? Jace. Did she vaporize you emotionally? Did she read your mind? Did she eat your soul? Jace. Did she? She drank my coffee." Jace went silent. Then, "No. Yes. No. Yes. Your coffee. My coffee." Jace looked horrified. "Is she alive? Fully?" Jace slumped back in his chair as if reconsidering the fabric of reality. "Well," he muttered, "that explains the cosmic imbalance I've been feeling." Cade rolled his eyes, but internally, his nerves buzzed like static. Because despite all logic, all reason, and all corporate policy, he wanted to see her again. And he had absolutely no idea if he ever would. Director Sarai Corinth did not have time for indulgences. Her schedule was designed to eliminate inefficiency. Her day divided into precise intervals. Strategy sessions, diplomatic calls, logistics reviews, station-wide analytics, and 3 strictly timed meal breaks. She followed it without deviation. Except now she deviated. Every morning, the schedule projected itself onto her office wall in glowing silver glyphs. And every morning, instead of reviewing resource allocations or responding to board requests, she found herself staring at one line item she'd manually added to the end of her agenda. Personal assessment. Merrick, Cade. Status. Pending. It was absurd. She should delete it. She should forget the evening entirely. She should compartmentalize, categorize, and proceed with her life exactly as before. But she couldn't. Sarai had lived among humans long enough to understand their odd attachments to emotion. She'd observed friendships, rivalries, bonds formed over food and laughter and shared boredom. But she had never participated in it. Valenthy's social structure was orderly, logical, minimalistic. Emotional expression existed, certainly, but was reserved for family, for tribe, for chosen partners. Not for colleagues, and never for subordinates. But Cade Merrick was not simply a subordinate. He was unpredictable, and unpredictability fascinated her. She remembered the nervous tremor in his voice, the warmth in his eyes when he spoke about Bria, the way he tried desperately to impress her with awful coffee. The moment Bria had fallen asleep in her arms and something within her chest had shifted, startlingly, like a door opening she hadn't realized was locked. She replayed it far too often. Sarai exhaled slowly. Her assistant, A young human named Rallo poked his head into her office. "Director, the board is requesting your presence for the quarterly compliance review, and also Level B is reporting." Sarai raised a hand. Rallo froze. "Reschedule the review," she said. His jaw dropped. "Reschedule. Director, the board doesn't like being. They will survive. And what about Level B? They will also survive." Rallo blinked rapidly, as if afraid to argue with cosmic forces beyond his comprehension. Yes, Director." She stood. "I will be taking my midday recess early." "You will?" "Yes." Rallo watched her leave with the baffled look of someone witnessing a myth behave incorrectly. And Sarai Corinth, Director of Operations, walked toward the lower levels of Waypoint Tarsus. To see a man who had accidentally told her she was gorgeous. Cade was making dinner when the door chimed. "Jace, if this is about the laser wrenches again, I swear." He opened the door. Sarai, Director Corinth stood there, but not in her usual pristine formality. Her coat was off. Her hair was unbound, falling in shimmering waves down her shoulders. Her markings glowed faint silver, a soft, unguarded pulse. She looked human, in a way he'd never seen. "May I come in?" she asked. Cade's heart did a thing that was medically inadvisable. "Why, yeah, of course." Bria ran out from behind him, squealing. Sarai. The director flinched only slightly before Bria hurled herself into her arms. Sarai caught her with surprising ease. Bria clung to her like a barnacle. "You came back." "Yes," Sarai said quietly. "I did." Cade watched, awestruck, as Sarai carried Bria inside. "What brings you here?" he asked, shutting the door. She turned toward him, and for the first time, she looked uncertain. "I wished to speak with you," she said. Without interruption, without titles. "Oh." His pulse hammered. "I see," he said, though he really didn't. Sarai took a slow breath. Her markings brightened. "Mr. Merrick." "Cade." She hesitated, then nodded once. "Cade." Hearing his name in her voice did something to him that he was not emotionally prepared for. "I have been considering," she continued, "the implications of our previous interaction." "Implications?" he echoed. "Yes. That sounds ominous." "It is not meant to be." She paused. "It is simply honest." Cade stepped closer, searching her expression. "Then be honest," he said softly. Sarai lifted her gaze to his. "I cannot stop thinking about you." The room went silent. Cade forgot to breathe. Bria looked back and forth between them with the fascinated attention of a child watching an important grown-up moment and deciding to store it in her memory forever. Sarai continued, quietly, "I do not understand it. But I do not wish to ignore it." He swallowed hard. "Sarai, are you saying?" "I am saying," she said, "that I would like to spend more time with you. If you are willing." It was the calmest, most composed confession he'd ever heard. And somehow, it made his heart race even faster. "I am," he whispered. "Of course I am." Sarai's shoulders relaxed, just slightly. And then Bria ruined the moment in the best possible way. Does this mean Sarai is going to be my space mom? Cade inhaled coffee grounds from 3 days ago. Sarai's markings flashed white. I am not certain that is the next logical step, she said carefully. Bria nodded sagely. Daddy moves slow. Cade nearly tripped. Sarai's lips curved. It wasn't a smile. It was something gentler. Something rarer. Something that looked dangerously like hope. Dash dash dash. Dinner was simple. Reheated protein strips, steamed synth vegetables, and a loaf of bread made from Cade's questionable understanding of yeast. But Sarai treated it like a feast. She listened to Bria's stories about school. She asked Cade questions about his latest repairs. She told them, quietly, about the deep forest bioluminescent groves of her homeworld. Cade watched her, watched how she moved, how she softened around his daughter, how her eyes lingered on him a moment too long. And he knew. This wasn't infatuation. It wasn't impulse. It wasn't even romance yet. It was something slower, deeper, a beginning. After dinner, Sarai stood by the door. I enjoyed this, she said. Me too, Cade replied. Bria jumped in place. Come back tomorrow. Sarai tilted her head. I cannot tomorrow. Oh, but, she added, perhaps the day after. Bria beamed. Cade's chest felt warm. Sarai placed a hand over her heart, a valiant gesture of sincerity. Good night, Cade, she said. He swallowed. Good night, Sarai. She left. And once again, Cade leaned against the closed door and wondered how on earth any of this was real. The next morning, rumors spread through the station like solar winds through an unshielded hull. Director Corinth seen on Level C. Director Corinth talking to a maintenance worker. Director Corinth smiling. By noon, maintenance worker had become secret boyfriend. By lunchtime, it had become illicit affair. By dinner, someone on Level B had confidently announced that Cade was being groomed to replace the head of engineering. Cade spent the entire day pretending he couldn't hear any of it. He hoped Sarai was doing the same. She wasn't. She was hearing everything. Valenthy's senses were sharp, sharper than humans realized. Sarai listened to every whisper with a tightening in her chest. She had made a choice. A personal choice. But the station was already turning it into a narrative she couldn't control. At 1800 hours, she stood alone in her office, the lights dimming around her. If the rumors spread too far, if the board took notice, if Cade became a target, she would have to decide how much she was willing to risk. How much she was willing to lose. And the terrifying thing was, for the first time in her life, she found something she was unwilling to lose at all.